everybody. Meteor would really like to welcome you to today's webinar on aligning brain-focused learning and teaching with the Gen Z iGen learner. Today's presenter is Dr. Sue Ann Highland. Sue Ann is an industrial organizational psychologist with over 20 years in education as a teacher, a principal, curriculum and assessment director, and a federal programs admin. She's published several studies, including examining the self-efficacy of adults who completed a Learning RX brain training program, and co-authored the relationship between online formative assessment and state test scores using multi-level modeling. She is a member of Alpha Chi Honor Society and holds multiple educational degrees. Her current role as managing director for Meteor Education's Four Corner Studio provides her opportunities to partner with multiple districts as they begin to transform learning for their students through the alignment of experiences to the environment. Welcome, Sue Ann. Thank you so much for spending time with us today. We look forward to hearing what you have to share with us on the topic.
Thank you, Ruth, for inviting me to share this information with everybody. I am so thrilled to be here. And I see several names that I even recognize today, so it's nice to see some of you here. I'm going to encourage you, I would love to have you guys involved. So if you would open up your chat down in the bottom of your webinar screen, you'll see a little carrot that says all panelists right now. If you would drop that down and do all panelists and attendees, then everybody around us can see what you have to say and questions you might have. I am going to encourage you, please feel free to interact, ask questions. I do not want to save all the questions till the end. I'd love to have them as we go. So let's spend some time today and connect those dots between what kids need today and how are they different than we were in school. So let's look at that engagement and today's kids. So the first thing to get you guys going and get you all started and get those brain juices flowing is I'd love to have you do some brainstorming in that chat box on every characteristic you know about the Gen Z or the iGen learner. So think of that K-12 student. Some of you I know Heather's got some little guys at home. So do me a favor, chat out in that chat box. What are some characteristics that you recognize about kids today? So I'll give you a second just to think about that and toss some of that brainstorming out. Oh, somebody came through. Don't forget to pop down to all panelists and attendees. Oh, absolutely. Technology usage for sure. What else? Let's give everybody a chance. Heather, tell me a little bit about your kids. What are some characteristics about your kiddos? Shorter attention span I see coming through. Absolutely. Phones are very important. Completely true. I have a 14-year-old at home that you'll hear about in a little bit. So that's absolutely true. What else? I want you to be thinking about that as we go through today's presentation. And let's see if we can come up with some ideas. Heather, you are absolutely right. They are not near as patient as they used to be. So let's find out why, and let's take a look at them. And I always, being a retired educator, I of course have to bring literature in. So let's talk about a wonderful book. I'm sure you're familiar with all of the Laura Ingalls Wilder books. And she even talked about furniture way back in her book in 1937 on the banks of Plum Creek. She talks about long benches. She talks about the mounted piece on the back of each bench that served as a desk. Each student had a primer. When they were ready to move to the next level, they moved back. Looked very much like this picture. So thinking of some of the things that you guys said on here, like Laura said, they love computer games. Nick said socialization problems resulting from lots of screen use. And Nick, you are very right, definitely. So take a look at this picture and be thinking, do they look excited to be at school? Do they look engaged? How can you tell if they're, engaging with the teacher? She's back in the back. You see that they're all nice and tall, sitting up straight, and they've got their hands folded. I had one participant one time tell me they were poised for this. They were poised to be able to hold phones all the way back there. Oh, Laura, that's so sad. It looks like your class is a child. Oh, I'm so sorry. You know, what year would you think that this might be? Somebody stick in that chat and tell me what year you think this might be from. Let's get a range. 1800s, 1955, Laura, could be 1940. You know, it's really, if you think about where we are and where we've come from, really, this is not necessarily that far in the past. My own mother actually grew up in a one-room schoolhouse in the central area in Illinois. So, you know, it wasn't that long ago. But what I want to challenge us with today is what's different between this and today's classroom? You know, I want us to be thinking that these kids right here in this picture actually have a really, really popular strategy that they've employed in this classroom. That's one-to-one technology. You can't really see it on all of their desks, but every student in this classroom has a piece of technology. Now, I'm not saying that's a bad strategy. I love that strategy. However, what I want us to think about is how do we utilize that? How do we really ensure the kids look more like this? You know, how can we make sure that these young ladies are actually doing proportions and they're looking at current logos of companies and they're looking into proportions and doing math? How exciting. You can tell they're leading in. They look excited. They're all, you know, if you look at the young lady in the front left, she looks like she's thinking about something. So what I want you to be thinking about, and you can jot yourself a little note down on your paper next to you if you'd like, I want you to be thinking about a couple of things. And I really would like to challenge us all as we go through classrooms, as we go through buildings, be thinking about both the teacher and the student. What do things look like? What are they doing? What are the students doing? What is the teacher doing? What do things sound like? Like I always say, whose voice do you hear the most? Because whoever's voice you're hearing the most is the one who's learning the most. So I want you to be thinking about that. And then also, we all know culture is so important. So what does the class culture feel like? What does the school culture feel like? When I was a principal, I always used to challenge my parents to, when you come for a school visit, I want you to go on the first tour without me. Because I want you to go and feel what that school feels like and really soak that in. That's so important. And why in the world do I even care about all of this? Because there's a wonderful organization called Gallup that if you've not read any of their things online, they do some amazing research on engagement. And engagement is the key to unlocking achievement. You know, when Gallup did this survey back in 2016, they really looked at 3 types of engagement. Either engaged, which is the green, disengaged, which means they're kind of if you imagine a boat, the people in the front are the engaged ones. They're rowing the boat. The middle of the boat guys who are kind of there, they're paying attention, but maybe they're not quite helping. That's those not engaged or disengaged. And then the dark gray are the ones I really want you to be thinking about. Those are the actively disengaged students. So why is this important? Because if you look at that number, you start off in 5th grade with only 8% actively disengaged, all the way to 32% as a 12th grader. Well, that really, really should make us all think, what in the world does that mean as their next steps? If they go out into the world, are they ready for work? If they go off to a trade school or off to college, we've got 66% of kids by 12th grade who are disengaged or actively disengaged. That's really, really tough because we want to make sure that, you know, that we're keeping them engaged as much as possible. And I love, Brian, you've got such a great question. Are students really that different today, or are we just paying more attention to their needs? Let me really, let's talk about that a little bit, because what I want to do is I want to take a look back first. And I want to look at what did generations before say about those of us who came along. So let's take a look. If we first start way back at the beginning of where we started to really pay attention to generations, if you think generations is about every 10 or so years until we see a new trend or a new set of characteristics, I want you to really pay attention to a few things. want you to watch the birth years, and I really want you to watch the column of the change before the generation before, because that really actually plays a lot into some of the characteristics. So if you start off in that GI generation, those were the ones that fought in World War II. It's really where the United States started really paying attention to those generational differences. Then you've got the silent generation that came on. They were very conformist. They were very civically minded. They really kind of paid attention even closer to their neighbors. If you think about why, that was from 25 to 45. So that was a very hard time. That was the time of lines to go and get food. That was times of really, really low economic times in the United States. Then we came into the baby boomers from 46 to 64. And again, as they were called, baby boomers, there was a huge, massive increase of 18 million swing from the generation before. Now, a few things about them: they were very anti-war. They were very highly loyal to their children. But I want to ask you a question. If you look at when they would be a teenager, they would be a teenager in the late 50s, early 60s. So I want to remind you of a young man who came on television during that time, Elvis Presley. Some of you may remember him or know of him. Some of you might even be too young. You might just know him in a distant memory, like maybe Sebastian in a distant memory. And they really had a hard time with him coming on to television. Why is that? Chat that out and tell me what they used to do. What was so important and changed the way we started to look at even television back then? Chat that in. Let's see if anybody can guess or anybody happens to remember from way back then. His moves, absolutely. His dance moves. Brian, you are right. They only used to televise him, much like a Zoom call, from the waist up, right? Because they didn't want him moving. They called him Elvis the pelvis. And they really wanted to make sure that they were controlling that as a television, for their television audience. Well, interestingly, when he started to come onto the scene, things started to change. And my dad and my mom are part of the baby boomers. And what used to happen is, those kids, when they would go into school, they had to do things like, if your dress was presumed too short, you had to put your hands down next to your dress with your fingers down. And if that dress was too short, your mom was called and you had a new outfit. My dad used to get in trouble if his hair was too long, if it sat on his collar. So those expectations were very different. Well, then we had Gen X. Everybody always wants to know, what does Gen X mean? It simply meant that it was the 10th generation to come through the United States when they were counting. So we were also called the sandwich generation. We were the first with VCRs and MTVs, and got a chance to stay up on Saturday nights and watch MTV and watch all of the great new music that was coming out with the videos. We were also this is really the time where divorce came in, where both parents were really out being in the workforce, where we became latchkey kids. We were also the most highly educated. But I want you to watch what happened. Look at that change before the prior generation. We dropped as a generation 22 million kids the other way. Generation X, not including today's COVID concerns that we have been the only generation who has seen 3 economic downturns in their lifetime. So things happened. When you have that much of a drop, you have things like, you don't need as many cars, you don't need as many homes, you don't need as much travel. So of course those industries started to see some slumps. Well, then in about 1981, we started to see this new generation Y come across. They were that very heavily scheduled child. They were the ones that on the refrigerator had the color-coded calendars that said dances in pink and baseballs in blue and footballs in orange, and kids knew exactly where they needed to be. You did homework in the car. You possibly ate in the car because you were traveling from one place to another. The really great thing about this generation, though, is they really love to right the wrongs in the world. They are also the very largest in U.S. history, flexible, autonomous. Now tell me why, though, that bottom line. Why do they say, don't call me a millennial? Chat that out and tell me why in the world would they say, don't call me a millennial? What's going on with that? Let's see if anybody can guess that. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Negative connotations. That's right on, Sebastian. So yeah, it's, kids, that generation of kids does not like to be called that because so many people do, just like Caroline said, so many previous generations think badly about them because things are so different. Now, what does this mean for this new group of kids coming up? So I want to go through a few slides that kind of go over the entire characteristics. And much like Brian asked before, I really want us to be thinking there is some of it that is influenced and influences a generation because of the things that are going on. So of course, right now we know with all of the quarantine and the COVID and things like that, it will have a long-term influence on generations. But there are some things that are just truly brain science that this group of kids is just very different. So let's talk about, the first thing that I always tell everyone, I believe is the most important thing that has helped to shape this generation. And I really think it's even more important today. The world that this generation lives in has never felt safe. And I want to give you an example. Again, my 14-year-old is my baby at home. And when she got ready to turn 13, I asked her what she was most looking forward to about being a teenager. And she thought about it for a while and she said, Mom, I can't wait to do this. And I said, honey, I don't understand. What do you mean? Is that a new dance move? Is that it was pre-TikTok. So, what in the world's going on? She said, no, Mom, I can't wait. I will be old enough to be able to go through the big scanner at the airport. Well, that's very sad to me because I can put a yes in that chat box. If you remember the times when we didn't have to even go through a scanner, you could take your entire family down to boarding to say, to send you off on a trip, or they could all meet you there to pick you up at the airport. Absolutely. Boy, do I see yeses coming through so quickly. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. So this group of kids is post 9/11. So they don't know anything more than this. Then you add on top of that, before about the age of 10, think about developmentally what this group of kids is dealing with. They're very concrete, sequential babies. When they start to be able to think abstractly is not really until the brain's ready at about 9, 10, 11 years old. So right now, our babies don't understand why we have to be stuck at home, why we can't go out, why we can't go to dinner, why we can't go to the movies, water parks, things like that. And then you've got your teenagers on the other hand, who kind of feel angry and upset that they can't do that. You're taking me away from my social life. I don't understand why I can't go to school. Those are the, and then added on top of that, we've got so much information with number 2 that, this digital native group knows how to get online and they know how to research. So when they say that we've got this as the method of transmission for COVID, they're online looking it up. And that's even scarier because again, their brains cannot really comprehend that. They are, Brian, you asked about, is it truly a characteristic or is it that we're paying attention? Well, this is actually a little bit of brain science that has come out that talks about attention spans. This generation of kids actually has only about an 8-second attention span. Now, I would never advocate that we only teach in 8-second sessions. That would probably wear out our teachers, but definitely. I love, Nick, you have something. I want to read, Nick, what you said to the entire group because I just think it's so poignant for today. And you said, exposed in a very vivid way, far too early, to problems they can't realistically solve. Their interactions with the world are far too unsupervised. And you are so right. You are so right. James said that his son is a senior in college and was born on the day, James, that's pretty amazing, on the day that Google launched. He's never known a world without Google. That's really a lot to think about. Our kiddos have a lot to deal with. Some of the other things that they can do that are just amazing is that they can switch back and forth from work to play faster. They have more cognitive flexibility. They know and appreciate that independence at a very young age sometimes. Now, oftentimes in a classroom, this can look like a challenge, and we have to teach our teachers to really understand the difference between true challenge that I don't want to, or challenge because I want to know why. They have very entrepreneurial spirits. I love that. 13% of this group already owns their own business as kids. 76% of them want to create businesses and jobs from their hobbies. Tell me if you can guess, chat that out and see if you can guess what the number one job is right now that they want to create from their hobby. Let's see if anybody can get that. And I love Craig, while we're waiting for people to chat, Craig says that he remembers when email was actually called electronic mail. Oh my gosh, that is so true. I bet you're right, Craig. I bet you they cannot even tell you what the E stands for on email. You're very correct. Matter of fact, I think I'll ask my 14-year-old later. Do they want to be a YouTuber? Last year, Ruth, absolutely. That would have been number one. James. Oh, James's son is a cyber gaming major in college. That's awesome. Video game design. Close. The number one job this year in 2020 is to be a social media influencer. If you don't know what that is, that's just simply where companies pay you to promote their product. So it's very interesting that that's what they want to do for a real job. This group thrives on opportunity. They also are extreme global thinkers. They want to make their life matter. They want to know the why about learning. They're very realistic and they are very transparent. So they know and they see through us if we are adults and we're saying something as simple as, hey, good job, Sebastian. Good job, Kim. They want to know realistically, well, what did I do? What does good job mean? What does that look like? Being very specific with them is very, very important. A few more things to think about when you think about this group of kids is that they are going to possibly have as many as 40 jobs in 10 different careers. Now, what that means, though, to us as educators is that means we're going to have to teach them how to retool skills. They're going to have to be very flexible in how they readapt to a new environment. Because so many, as you can see from the other two bullets, so many jobs that they will be exposed to really may not even be existent. So that's very important. And I love the CEO of Google when he says, we should stop asking, what do they want to be when they grow up, but what problem do they want to solve? Now we're seeing more kids talking about becoming doctors because of, COVID and what they're seeing. They want to see things solved much faster. Manufacturing. I'm seeing a larger resurgence in kids who talk about wanting to make something, which is really exciting. And that's only come around since COVID. Another thing that I would really encourage you, if you've not been on the World Economic Forum website, I would encourage everybody here to get on that. Forewarning, though, that you will spend hours on there because it's a pretty exciting website. But what they do is, as a set of researchers, they come up every few years with a new set of skills that employers are seeking. And that they're asking, when you come and work for me, what kinds of skill sets do I want to look for? And if you notice, I want you to take a look for just a second. I'm going to be quiet and I'm going to let you look between 2015 and 2022. Tell me just things you notice. What do you notice between those two lists? Go ahead and chat that out if you can. Absolutely. EQ versus IQ. Great catch, Eric. Very nice. You're right. No specific content. I think that's really important to take a look at. There's not, they need to know Algebra 2. They need to know language arts at this level. I think that's important, and I'm absolutely a proponent. I think there are things such as math fluency, reading fluency, we absolutely must have. Because what that does, if you are not fluent in math, in something as simple as math facts, if you're not fluent in reading, what that does is that actually is a base skill for things that you see on that 2022 list. It slows down critical thinking. It slows down the ability to analyze because it takes you longer to process basic information. That's very, very important. So what does that mean for today's classrooms? I want you to think about engagement and the types of engagement that we need to be thinking about in today's world. So I want you to think about three things. Relational, important. Oh, let me stop there for just 1 second. Nick, in both columns, Nick says there's skills which have been important for a long time. Even technology is always important at every age, and those who control it always have a big advantage. That's a very great pick out of that list. Thank you, Nick. All right, so engagement. I want you to think of three types of engagement. First one, and in my opinion is the most important, is relational engagement. It's being able to connect with peers and adults, the environment, that social network. That's that place that you enter into the other types of engagement, and it starts what I know Ruth loves to call the flywheel. I love that because that just continues to get things rolling. And you all know how important those relationships are. Without a really good, solid relationship, kids don't want to be involved. The second type of engagement is cognitive engagement. That means that we're giving kids tasks that ask them to give a little effort. We don't want it too easy because if it's too easy, they tend to check out because they'll pass off. If you think about round robin reading, for those of you who don't teach elementary, you may not know what that is. And that's just where I start over here and I say, all right, Ruth, you're going to start and you're going to read paragraph 1. Sebastian's going to read paragraph 2, and so on and so forth. And all the way over on this side is Kim. Kim's a gifted reader. And Kim might have already pre-read that entire set of paragraphs. And she's checked out. She is already checked out. Now, over on the other side of the room may be Susan, who is a little bit of a slower reader. So she's having a hard time catching up. And Laura, I totally agree with you. Down with that round robin reading, because that is so difficult. So that's a cognitive engagement task that's a really low task. We want to make sure that we've got it not too easy and not too hard. It's kind of like Goldilocks, right? We want that just right cognitive engagement. Then we've got agentic engagement. Agentic engagement is so, so important because it is personally, it's where those kids actually want to be involved. They're asking to be involved. It is, it's a place where the kids are saying, hey, I want to be learning this. I learn best like this. And I love, there's a picture that I want to show you. And this is my favorite picture that we use at Meteor. And the top left picture that you see with those two little girls is a prime example of agentic engagement. They have chosen where they best learn. They're sitting under a desk right now. They're reading together. They're doing an activity together. They are completely engrossed in what they're doing, but they chose to go there because it best works for them. And Laura, I bet you see a lot of kiddos in kindergarten who would love to just sit where they want to sit. And so when you talk about what do these kids need, I want you to be thinking about the ecosystem itself, that classroom. What does the brain need? So the brain needs 5 very important things in order to pay attention, in order to be engaged. And these 5 things are so, so important. The first thing that they need is they need relevant input. They need behaviorally relevant input. They need things that are fun and novel, that don't get boring. They want, now I always encourage people, we say at Meteor that we want to give kids voice and choice. So we want them to be able to say, where am I best going to learn today? There's nothing wrong with having them have a specific place to learn at certain times, but we want to be able to have that novelty. Doesn't mean you have to change up your schedule every single day, because that would drive some kids crazy, but you do need some fun. They also need rewarded input. That brain needs affirmation, positive cues, very specific, again, specific feedback. They need intense, strong sensory connections. That multisensory approach, if you're teaching kindergarten, I can bet you money that you use a multisensory approach, because that is so, so important. You want to also, with that intense input, I want you to be thinking about, how can I integrate subject areas? Because that is extremely important for kids to see that connection. They also do need repeated input. And recall information is not bad. Like I said, having that focus on some of that reading fluency, that math fluency, that's important. But I also want that connection to higher level skills. I want them to analyze and synthesize, because that is so important for the brain. Now, I've had a lot of people ask me, what does this mean now that we're possibly maybe going back, maybe not going back, maybe doing hybrid? And I want you to think about this. I want you to make adjustments for the present or for the temporary, but I want you to always be planning for the future. So when you're thinking about your classroom ecosystem, this happens to be a special ed classroom, and this particular district, they're here in Colorado, and they have identified some very specific areas to have kids go and learn. And I'm going to show you a whole series of classrooms that I want you to be thinking about to yourself, and either jot them down, or please feel free to toss those out on all panelists and attendees. Toss out things that you see. And I'm going to walk you through a few of these things that I want to share that really Generation Z would benefit from. One thing here that I'd like to show you is just that, again, that voice and choice, being able to have a variety of seating. Got some soft seating, some high, some low, chairs that are very comfortable, very flexible. And then if you notice, I'll show you on this second picture right here, this green chair right here in the very front, that is a chair that they can actually be encouraged to sit backwards. Because if you notice, the cutout is where your legs can sit, so it's not cutting off circulation. So be thinking ergonomically what's important. If you notice, classrooms that are flexible, they can be put into any different configuration to be able to allow kids to lean in like this young man is, to work together. What about this? A great open area where maybe a classroom can go out, take advantage of that light. Kids can move around. You can send small groups out. Love this. Different types of seating. This generation more than ever really, really needs, again, that autonomy and that ability to move around. Even when you think of a media center, be thinking about ways that I can create different areas. Oh, Eric, you're so sweet. I love it. Would be fun to teach in a room like this and not have boring chairs all in a row. Yeah, I agree. I do tend to call those cemetery rows, because as you watch, if you have students in a straight row, you'll see that they tend to check out even further, the further back you go. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to go ahead and go through some of these and just flip through them, because what I want you to be thinking about is some of these right now, if we go back, may or may not be able to happen. And that's really important, because these kids, we still have to meet their needs. And I really want to encourage you to be thinking of some things. This group of kiddos, of course, proximity is and always has been important. We want to have inclusive relationships. We want to have that choice, not only in content, but in their environment. We want to encourage that success and that risk-taking. We also want to really, really watch the production of language. So that's important. We want to make sure that we always have an ability to have kids seeing one another and being able to speak to one another. So when you're thinking about that modern school again, you're thinking of ways that you're supporting technology, safety and security, of course, flexibility in that design. And I would really encourage you, especially now, to be thinking about outdoor learning. And as we think of this, I want to take you a little, I want to take a step away from just what are their characteristics, because I want to talk for a minute on how are students and staff dealing, and maybe even you and your family personally are dealing with what's going on right now, because we are in unprecedented times. Even when we went through the time of H1N1, times are so different today. So I want to talk a little bit I want to give you a few definitions and a few things to think about as you move forward. And then I'm going to show you some ways that you can actually arrange your classrooms to be thinking about all of those characteristics and all of those needs of Gen Z and still be collaborative and get them what they need. So let's first define crisis, because we are in a time of crisis, difficulty. A lot of people think that all that word means is just, guess what? It's a difficult time. Well, it's actually got a secondary definition that says it's a time when difficult and important decisions must be made. Well, what happens when you have to make those decisions? Our brain's capacity is diminished because it's in crisis mode. So it's in fight or flight. And so I'm going to stop actually just for a second. I'm going to answer a few of these questions that are coming in. Laura says that her kids, kindergarten kiddos, absolutely had separation issues. Oh, Laura, my heart breaks to hear that. And that's so true. And imagine those kids already had good established relationships. What happens when those new babies come in? I'm really encouraging, if your school it has to wear a mask, I'm encouraging people to consider, and I'm not a medical expert, I am just a psychologist, so I deal up here, not in the medical part, but what I want you to think about is, can we use the clear face shields instead of a mask? Because if I have a mask and I cover here, you can't see me smile and support you. So I'm really encouraging schools and districts to consider buying the clear shields for their teachers. So that way, when a teacher walks in, there's nothing better than having a teacher look at a kiddo, give him a little wink and go, "You're doing a good job." That is so important. And then Craig also had a great question that came through that says, is it okay if a kiddo lies on their bed up against the pillows during Zoom learning? You know what, Craig? I will tell you, I believe that that's okay. I don't think that's too cozy at all. I would actually very much encourage that. I would tell you that as a mom, I allowed my 14-year-old, when she was in 8th grade, finishing up the end of the year, I encouraged her to do that. Because I want her, if I want her to be engaged in what she's doing, I want her to be comfortable. So I don't think there's anything wrong with allowing a kiddo to sit on their bed or on a couch outside. I will tell you, anyone that I work with knows that sometimes, you know what, I'm outside on my back porch during a meeting. Sebastian and I have been on many meetings where I've been on the back porch, or I've been out on my swing out in the backyard having some great sunshine, because that vitamin D is so important, right? I love, Nick says to everybody, I love this. Nick says he's going to post a large photo of him smiling on his site. And then if he goes back at the entry point, so that way the kids can see what's under the mask. That is so awesome, Nick. I love it. I would even encourage you to have kids do the same thing. How can we put a picture of kids up to say, this is me, and be able to do that interaction? So what happens though, when you have that crisis, is there's one big piece that's really, really damaged during these times. And that's your self-efficacy. So self-efficacy is your belief in your abilities to be able to perform a task or to achieve a goal. That is very, very important, because that takes control over motivation, behavior, and your environment. When you hurt or lower self-efficacy, achievement gets lowered. So why in the world does that have anything to do with COVID? Why does that have anything to do with coming back? Because we as educators spend our whole career helping kids believe they can do it. We also, as administrators, help our teachers believe that they can do it. So the number one largest impact on teachers or on student achievement is collective teacher efficacy. That's teachers as a whole being in that similar belief and believing that those kids can do it. They can achieve, they can get to the next level. They can go above and beyond what's expected. So if you don't believe that you can do something, then you don't have the capacity to make decisions during a crisis. So if you look at that triangle down there, you've got environment, behavior, and the individual. So when one of those things is off kilter, you really can't achieve a goal. Self-efficacy, in my professional opinion, is the biggest key. The biggest key to what we need to bring to the table this fall. We need to provide kids mastery experiences. Success builds faster than any failure. Even though that, we've got that wonderful Chinese or Asian saying that says you fall down 6 times, you get up 7. Absolutely. That's the resiliency piece. But when you have a success, that builds things faster. That builds that self-efficacy faster. Also, kids need to be able to observe and watch those role models around them. Seeing others succeed and celebrating helps me get better myself. Even if we are back on Zoom and virtual sessions next year, I would encourage you as teachers and educators to take the time to celebrate, to take the time to have kids talk about and verbalize their successes. Because what that leads into then is that verbal persuasion. So those people of influence, teachers, parents, coaches, that's going to help strengthen belief. Well, when we have an entire profession who's never had to deal with online learning to the capacity that we did, and lack of being able to communicate with some of our kids in higher needs areas, maybe we're not sure. I can always check and make sure that little Susie always has lunch and she's eaten a good breakfast, but I can't if they're not in front of me. So take the time to check in with them. Take the time to really check on the next one, that emotional state. We use as a leadership team, we use the neatest software called Rhythm. And what we do is every single day we do a check-in. And it's so wonderful to be able to watch yourself and be able to bring attention to that emotional state yourself. Because the more stressed I am, the more that puts a damper on my self-efficacy. And then the last one that really helps build self-efficacy in kids and adults is that visualization. So when you can visualize behaviors, when you can actually, if you're an athlete, if you've ever done any kind of athletics, you know that visualizing what you're going to do first is so, so important. So teaching the kids how to do that is also very important. Being able to have them walk through. If I can't do a science experiment because I don't have the stuff there, how can I actually watch myself pour things together? How can I watch myself dissect? Those little things are going to help build with kids. And the same thing with teachers. If I'm having a staff meeting, I want to make sure that when I have all of my staff, it's really, really hard to see everybody on those little bitty screens. That's difficult because we take in almost 90% of our input off of visual cues, off of those nonverbals that we see every day. So really taking the time to even do check-ins with individuals. So what things can we do in the physical environment as one of those 3 pieces of that triangle to adjust for the present? Don't go and dump all of your awesome furniture and your awesome environments and go back to completely set apart. I want to really caution you to be thinking about these things. Again, mobility, multiple modalities. That's safety, of course, making sure that we're physically safe. I want you to be thinking about, how can I utilize technology and integrate that even if I'm sitting way far away from one another? Maybe I can't share a large sheet of paper, but maybe I can utilize technology, and there are some tools out there for that. And then again, that collaboration and that ownership of your learning. So how can I do that? These are just some example layouts that I want to share with you of ways that you can maybe get yourself thinking of how in the world do I do this? So this is the original layout of this particular classroom. This is a second grade room. If you notice, lots of collaborative tables, lots of groups of 2s and 3s and 4s, some group area in the back. So what might that look like during this COVID time? If you notice, we've done a few things here, and I just want to point a few things out. This top right-hand side, you see that we've still got a group of 4. We have a great group of 4 right here, but they're spaced 6 feet apart. Everything that you see has a 6-foot distance to it. We're also utilizing some of our existing furniture here with some bookcases to be able to kind of just give kids that visual reminder to stay a little bit further apart. But if you notice, they can even still talk with one another. How exciting. Another option, you know, again, this one just shows the use of those little dividers on the ends of the tables. Then look at this. Look at this next one. Another great layout that I can maybe pull a small group into this middle area, 2 or 3 kids, spread out a little bit. I can even still utilize that horseshoe table and still have kids collaborating and talking with one another. I might have to integrate again some of that technology though, to make sure that my kids maybe again can't write on a large piece of chart paper, but they can do it on a technology, an iPad or something like that. Again, here's a second layout. This is just an example of a 4-5 classroom. Original layout, you know, lots of groupings, again, lots of soft seating usage. Here it is, 6 feet apart, rearranged. I want you to think design to the edges. Push those out to the edges to see if we can get kids further apart. Then that way you get an opportunity to do some collaboration and you still get to meet that need of kids. This group of children going through our schools right now, it is imperative that we still allow them to collaborate. We want to make sure that they have that opportunity to see one another, to talk, to integrate, because again, we want to make sure that we're still building that self-efficacy up so they can feel like they can achieve. So I want to leave you with 2 final thoughts. I want to leave you with some questions. I had a very dear friend who sat down with me and said, you know, what questions should we be asking right now? Now I want you to be thinking, what are some of the questions that we're being asked, but maybe our answers are different now? The second one is, what are some of the questions being asked? And then there's a shift now with COVID. And maybe we've affirmed some of those answers, but now we need to accelerate them. And then I want to really challenge, we've got something that's happening, a very interesting phenomenon that I'm starting to hear from some parents that say maybe some students are more comfortable learning online. So what do we need to do differently in our classrooms to get them excited and engaged in school? Then, oh, and Laura, you are so right. That is so true. Kindergarten children love hugs. And what will that look like? Right now, Laura, I think that that's something that, again, is that answer is different right now. That right now we teach kiddos, we're going to do some fun air hugs. We're going to do some fun cheers. We're going to do all of those things that maybe look a little different, but then we still are in that same type of space. And you know what? I'm going to be telling all of those little babies that I know, you know what? I'm saving my hugs. I'm saving my hugs for when I get to really hug you. For right now, we're going to do something fun and different. Because again, remember, go back to what does the brain need? The brain needs novelty. So make it a game. Make it fun for those little guys. They can even come up with great fun air hugs. I think that would be a really fun challenge. You know, when they come to school, being able to tell them, okay, everybody come and be ready with a really fun cheer or a fun air hug. And then the last question is, what new questions are we asking? What new questions are coming out of today? And I thought it was very interesting. I just want to allow you to read this final little thank you. And the reason I bring this final little thank you forward is, you know, I always want to know what kids are thinking. And my daughter at the end of the year, her 8th grade year going into 9th grade, you know, she's much like those seniors who are graduating and maybe missing some of those milestones. She wanted to send a thank you to one of her teachers. So she actually wrote all of her teachers before I even knew. And she shared one of them with me. And I will warn you, if you are someone who gets a little teary-eyed like I do, could bring you a little bit to tears, but I want to leave you with that. And I'm going to let you go quiet for just a minute. And I want you to hear what our kids are feeling and what our kids really believe, because you matter. As educators, as parents, you matter. And if nobody else in this world says thank you, I want to personally say thank you. I'm going to give you just a minute to read this and then we'll say goodbye. I just really want to say again, thank you so much. You do matter. What you do changes the lives of teachers and students every single day. And this generation will be better. I believe they will be better, even though this is tough. They will come out better and stronger than we ever even thought because of what we do in education. I'll leave this up for just a minute and open the floor for any questions in this last few minutes. If anybody's got any questions, feel free to type them in, and we will get those answered. I'm going to put my email up here too. If you need anything, please feel free. Call me personally. Reach out to myself or to Ruth and Sebastian, or any of us here at the Meteor team. We are here for you. We are here to help you with resources. I appreciate it. Oh, Brian, you're going to make me cry. Thank you, Brian. She is very mature, wise beyond her 14-year-old years. She's amazing. Nick, let's say, Nick says, in classical education thinking, there are 3 stages: grammatical, logical, and rhetorical. For many decades, students have are pressured to function in the rhetorical while skipping developmentally the first 2. This is like asking someone to make a table, but without teaching them the different types of woods and glues and varnishes and stains, and without teaching them how to analyze the structural and aesthetic needs of the table. And Nick, you are so right. It is very important. And I want us to think as we go back, really, we need to not forget those things. Kids need to learn to crawl before they walk, before they run. And we get a chance to really influence them, and we get an opportunity. I believe this is an opportunity for us to go back. And when we go back into schools, we really teach them the why behind the way we're sitting, the why for using the mask. What are we helping them to understand so they can create that bigger scale thinking, that analysis, that synthesis, that understanding of the bigger world. Remember, one of their biggest traits is to be able to understand that global thinking piece. So, it's very important. What else? What other questions might I help you with this afternoon? Oh, wow. Laura says, you should have seen my kindergartner make bubble machines out of styrofoam wheel and a wooden dowel and pipe cleaners. You know what, Laura, that doesn't surprise me. I'm so tickled to hear that you love that STEAM type of activity, because that's really important to really integrate those. And again, you can do reading and math and writing and science, and even look at history through the use of that type of activity. So that's kudos to you. That's wonderful. Well, I'm going to pass this back over to Ruth for this afternoon. And again, thank you all so much for being here today. Cannot tell you how much we appreciate you.